as a foundation, we have a responsibility to make that efficient and something that will have impact.
Welcome to EyeCan, a podcast about ophthalmology through a uniquely Canadian lens with Dr. Sarah Ziai and myself, Dr. Guillermo Rocha.
This season, we have two new co-hosts joining us, Dr. Mona Dagger and Dr. Hadi Saheb. They'll be hosting upcoming episodes throughout the season. Season 3 of the EyeCan podcast is brought to you by Bayer Ophthalmology. Thank you for your support. On this episode of EyeCan, we are excited to introduce our listeners to the Canadian Ophthalmological Society Foundation. And we are so lucky to have my dear friend and EyeCan podcast co-host, Dr. Guillermo Rocha, here with us today. He is the president of the Canadian Ophthalmological Society Foundation, and he's going to tell us all about the history of the COS, the foundation, when it started, what you guys are working on, and what we want you all to know about the foundation. Dr. Rocha, many of you will know him listening to this podcast. He is originally from Mexico City. He trained in ophthalmology at McGill University and has completed subspecialty training in ocular immunology and inflammation at McGill, as well as a fellowship in cornea and external diseases at the University of South Florida in Tampa. He also completed the Physician CEO Executive Program at the Kellogg School of Management in 2016 and the Foundations of Clinical Research Certification Program at Harvard Medical School in 2022. He is Professor of Ophthalmology at the University of Manitoba and the president of the COS Foundation, past president of the Canadian Ophthalmological Society, and that was between 2016 and 2018. I remember those days really well as past president of the Canadian Cornea External Disease and Refractive Surgery Society. In 1995, Guillermo was awarded the Canadian Society for Clinical Investigation and Medical Research Council of Canada Resident Research Award for his work on the causative factors of ocular inflammation. He was also the recipient of the Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba iCare Award for 2014. The year after, he was recognized as one of the 10 most successful Mexicans in Canada, followed by an award as one of the 10 most influential Hispanic Canadians in 2016. Dr. Rocha performs anterior segment, refractive, and corneal surgeries. He is my favorite Mexican in Canada, for sure. Probably my favorite Mexican in the world. I'm so happy to have you join us today, my dear friend and EyeCan co-host, Guillermo. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, this is something I think it's going to be a lot of fun to share some ideas, and it is so great to have you as my interviewer. So I'm a bit more relaxed, I guess, and I really appreciate your introduction. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And I remember we had the tables turned about a year and a half ago when we flipped spots. And so now it's my turn, and I'm so happy to be able to do this with you today.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people haven't really heard much about the COS Foundation. And so I think this is an excellent opportunity to raise awareness about the foundation and, get the word out there about what the foundation does and what our goals are. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the history of the foundation and where and how it all started? And I know that recently it's become more active. So maybe we'll start with the history and then we'll move into, more recent days.
Yes. No, I think every society as it develops and it grows, has to sort of seek new projects and evolve into different aspects. I remember when I was a resident a few years ago that the COS simply meant possibly the journal, the CJO journal, that's fine, but also it meant just the annual meeting. And I remember when I first moved to Manitoba back in 1998, a couple of years later, I was invited to participate in the board as kind of representing community ophthalmologists because I was here in Brandon, Manitoba. And there was no foundation at that time. But we started seeing other organizations internationally develop these aspects of giving and how do you recognize people or recognize students or researchers. And so the foundation, as the COS Foundation properly was established in 2011 with its first president, who was Dr. Francois Coder from Montreal. And so that kind of triggered a moment in time where, yes, there was a foundation. It held some projects, some collection of funds, but it sort of was the beginning. It was the seed that sort of grew into other things. Um, it has now been around for 12 years, but we really saw a great evolution over the past, I would say, 4 to 5 years, in terms of the different projects that it has developed. So that's sort of a little bit of the history. And I think it has to do with that evolution of the parent or mother society where it kind of sprung from.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I've been involved formally with the COS for about 5 or 6 years, but less formally for about 10 or 12. And you're right, I hadn't really heard about the foundation either until the past few years. And ironically, the past few years is COVID, right? And so let's talk a little bit about that. How did the foundation manage to, become sort of better known during COVID? And you must have had so many challenges, and maybe those challenges allowed the COS Foundation to flourish in a way. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened during COVID with the foundation? It must have had a big impact on how fundraising was going.
Yes, I mean, the fundraiser for the foundation, we did not have a click button for the foundation even. It was sort of occasionally industry, occasionally people that would donate certain amounts of money. And just before I became president of the COS Foundation, an award was kind of established with the Stein family, the Innovator Lectureship Award, which has become a yearly presentation at the COS annual meeting. And that was a big influx of cash that sort of kind of raised the profile of the foundation. It established a link between the foundation itself with the COS proper in terms of education and in terms of a specific purpose, which was innovation. I remember I stepped down as president of the COS in 2018, and by that time, I had been on a number of roles. And when I was approached to continue as COS Foundation president, I kind of sort of hummed and hawed because I really have never been good at raising money, and it wasn't kind of on my radar. I hadn't been involved with foundations at all. But it kind of, maybe a bit selfishly, it was a way to stay connected to all the wonderful people I had met through the years, to stay in tune with what was happening in ophthalmology in Canada. And also, I thought a way to kind of give back in a different way. So I sort of considered what was our current board membership, and they're all people with whom I work really well. And so we said, okay, we'll start with this. And we really didn't have much direction. There were big efforts in advocacy at the time, if you recall. So we did have click boxes in the registration or in the membership pages for advocacy, but still we didn't have any big presence as a foundation. And then COVID hit. And there's a saying, and it's attributed to many different people, but never let a crisis go to waste. And so, yes, it is difficult when people are having trouble to ask for money or to develop other projects. But what we did was actually regroup, and we had a series of strategic meetings, and we changed a few things. So we kind of rebranded our mission. We worked with designers with the help of the COS in terms of the logo for the foundation and a letterhead that would kind of change the presence. And we established and we defined 4 specific projects, because I think it's very important. If you have a foundation and you're collecting money, everybody wants to kind of give something and give something back. But as a foundation, we have a responsibility to make that efficient and something that will have impact. So we narrowed it down to first the awards. So one was the Harold Stein Innovator Lectureship Award, which has been continuing, as I mentioned. The second was a project called Honor a Mentor. So all of us have been influenced by different people throughout our lives. And so we established this project of honoring a mentor with just a short verbiage or paragraph. And then we decided to move on to access to care, and then a global perspective. And so all of these have sort of taken off to a greater or lesser degree. And in particular, I would say the award section has been very impactful during the annual meeting. The honor a mentor, I would encourage our listeners to think of who has been influential in your life. And that is an aspect that we still need development in the foundation. And then I can offer two specific projects that we're doing. As I mentioned, the access to care includes a subsection of access to vision care, preservation of sight, elimination of preventable blindness, and adherence to treatments. And we can talk more a little bit about this. In terms of the global initiatives, to be honest with you, we thought this was kind of, yeah, you know what, let's put it as a section, because I think we'll have to get to this in the future. And that actually has been an aspect that has really, really taken over. So that's what we did during the pandemic. We kind of said, let's use this time to regroup, to rebrand, to kind of repurpose our mission and be ready for when we come out of the pandemic.
Okay, that's great. So can we break this down a little bit just to make it clearer? So Eyes on Ukraine, I feel like I have a really good handle on what this is and when it started and how incredibly well it has done with the work of yourself and a few other COS members. But do you want to just tell the audience quickly about Eyes on Ukraine? Because then I want to go back into the awards. And I really do want to talk about the honor a mentor, because I think this is going to be huge once people understand what it is. I think if we get the word out, everyone's going to love this project. So let's start with Ukraine.
Yeah. And that's exactly, it falls into the global perspective. So originally when we got together, we said global. Yeah, let's have impact on international ophthalmologists or ophthalmology programs. And sure, it was a very general term. But then, as things happen, all of a sudden in February of last year, the war on Ukraine started. And I think there was a general feeling from many people of how can we help? What can we do? And I was approached by the Eyes on Ukraine group, which was actually triggered by an ophthalmology resident from the University of Calgary, Dr. Michael Krystalski, in coordination with one of our COS members, Dr. Larissa Dersko-Zulinski from Toronto. And they had sort of gathered a group of Ukrainian Canadian ophthalmologists, whom we all know. There's a large group who had the interest, had people that were kind of wanting to donate money, instrumentation, supplies to the efforts, the medical efforts in Ukraine. And so they kind of needed a vehicle to crystallize this in a different way. They kind of needed a sponsor or a collaborator to give more credibility to the group as they presented it. And so that put us on overdrive. I cannot mention how much the COS itself helped us establish new links to receive money, whether by credit card or check or wire transfer or PayPal, any way we had. So because we had a lot of influx coming in. And to give you an idea, over the past year, the combination of this group, in particular the efforts of Eyes on Ukraine, have resulted in close to $1 million of in-kind donations from industry, close to $75,000 directly through the COS Foundation. And the group itself, led by Dr. Krystalski's efforts, has received the Queen's Jubilee Medal from the Minister of Health in Alberta, in addition to the Secretariat Award from the American Academy of Ophthalmology. There's been an incredible participation on all fronts, including the translation to Ukrainian of a trauma manual in conjunction with U.S. ophthalmologists. There have been efforts in teleophthalmology and telemedicine assisting people on the ground. And it is really an incredible story of what the Eyes on Ukraine have been able to do. And even though we're kind of a small vector in facilitating this, I feel very proud as well about the efforts of the COS Foundation in collaborating and in helping a little bit in all of these major efforts. So, that's one example of something where we thought, yeah, this is something for the long term. And all of a sudden we're thrown into this and we had to go on overdrive.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's a really good example of how a group of people can come and then come together, and with the help of the COS, because often it helps to have, an umbrella, a little umbrella to be under and to work together for
Exactly.
this huge success and ongoing, right? Eyes on Ukraine is ongoing.
Oh yeah, it's ongoing and it keeps growing. And I was at one of the presentations at our last annual meeting there in Quebec City, and it just gives you goosebumps just to see all the efforts and all the impact that this has had.
EyeCan wants to know what you think. Please send your comments on today's episode or any suggestions you may have for topics or features to communications@cos-sco.ca, and we'll try to incorporate them into future episodes.
Hi, I'm David Neighborly, and I listen to the EyeCan podcast.
Can we move on? I want to talk about awards. So you said awards briefly. Tell me what you mean, which awards, what can we do to educate people, and how can we help nominate people and give awards?
Well, the main award we have right now, and it has been established, and it's sort of a collaboration between the COS Foundation and the COS proper, is the Harold Stein Lectureship Award. This year we had Dr. Shigeru Kinoshita from Japan, who's a leader in, I almost call it science fiction of corneal endothelial disease. I mean, it's amazing what he has been doing. So what we're really referring to more in terms of awards, I think, would be two other categories. One is the honor a mentor, where an individual would recognize someone who has been important in their lives and issue a collaboration or a donation in that person's honor. And so this sort of, I think, raises awareness of the people who have been important in our lives. And it also recognizes that we're not just sort of opening ground right now, but we're really following on other people's footsteps. And I think it probably will create an even bigger or larger sense of community within the COS membership. So what I would encourage our listeners to know is that is a way of recognizing someone who has been important, but it also will translate itself in some of the projects that we're doing. And one of the projects that we're doing along the lines of the award is we collaborated with a group of medical students who are interested in ophthalmology, as well as CCOR, which is the ophthalmology residence in Canada. And this year, the first medical student symposium was organized on the first day of the COS with great attendance. And we established at that point the first COS Foundation keynote speaker. This year was Dr. Agnes Wong, focusing on compassion, and it was a truly amazing lecture. And we also, through the COS Foundation, sponsored 10 students to have their registration covered for the COS annual meeting. And we really did collaboration with the group of residents and the medical students in terms of following a really good process. People had to submit their interest, why they thought they qualified for this travel or for this registration award. And we got so many submissions, all great individuals, and eventually had to narrow it down to those 10 people as well. So this is sort of something locally, but I think for the future, I would love to see where we can offer some of these things to international students or international researchers in a more organized way.
Yeah, that was a great half day. You probably know this, but our listeners may not know that the Medical Student Symposium actually sold out.
Wow.
And there was a waiting list of medical students. We just didn't have the space. I think we were anticipating it to be great, but maybe not to sell out. And so we'll see what happens with that in future years. And I know how much CCOR appreciated the foundation's support in building this first Medical Student Symposium half day.
Excellent. Yeah, and I know you've been working a lot, very closely with them as well. So yeah, it was a true collaborative effort.
Yeah, I'm most excited about this Honor a Mentor, which seems
Hmm.
to me like it's a newish project, I think,
Hmm.
which is why I just want to spend another 1 minute on it. So you did
Sure.
talk about it briefly, but I just want to reiterate. So this is an opportunity to recognize a mentor or
Hmm.
a hero or a champion or someone who has touched you in your trajectory in
Hmm.
ophthalmology, and at the same time make a donation in their honor to the foundation. I think this is amazing
Exactly.
because um, we don't thank those people enough. And ophthalmology is such a niche specialty that
Hmm.
I think every single one of us probably had one or two um, people who championed our path. And so
Exactly.
um, I hope to see this project grow and expand.
Hmm.
Um, and hopefully some of our listeners will, be interested in this and spread the word around
Hmm.
to sort of honor. And it doesn't have to be someone who's retiring or who's leaving. It's not the same thing as a lifetime
No,
achievement
no.
award. It's just a small recognition,
Exactly.
I think. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and we're
Um,
gonna try to make it easier as well. Just a few clicks where people are not having a lot of trouble getting a photograph or writing. It has to be a simple
right.
process through the website. So that's one of the goals over the next several months.
Wonderful. I do want to spend a few
Hmm.
minutes talking about who is working so hard with you on this foundation. So I know there is a board of directors. A lot of the names we recognize: Dr. Andrew Budning, Dr.
Hmm.
Yvonne Weiss, Dr. Paul Rayfuse. Is that the board, or did I miss anybody on the board? Who else do we want to recognize who's been contributing and helping on a regular basis?
Well, Elizabeth Fowler and Kim Teitler from the
COS.
COS
Mhm.
itself. I mean, they have been incredible in terms of helping us kind of launch all of these projects. They have been working tirelessly.
Wonderful. And then are you guys looking for volunteers, or do you have any succession planning for the board? What is the situation?
Mhm.
Or is it just like, this group is going to stay this way for a few years?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question because we have seen not only the change with the projects that I've been describing, but also with it's almost like we are growing to the level where we need to start becoming a little bit more independent. I guess like a child who grows into adolescence. I don't know if we're in adolescence equivalent right now or not, but basically, I think in terms of the future, we would like to define governance a little bit better and define terms of office. Obviously, we're all enjoying what we're doing, and so we want to see many of these projects continue. But I think there's always an important thing about bringing in fresh blood, fresh ideas, and moving forward. So we've started working towards that. In the sense that we have now established a proper agreement with the COS itself. And the hope for the future would be that at some point the foundation is kind of a standalone entity. And when that happens, I mean, as we get through that process, we certainly need all the help we can get in some of these projects. Um, I think the evolution would be that eventually we have a close link in terms of values, in terms of mission with the COS, which is aligned, but we should be more independent in terms of our administrative team and focusing more on fundraising. That also brings about the responsibility of having proper programs. I would like to mention that all of this also has been driven by our access to care projects, where we have been collaborating both with industry, but also with Orbis in establishing two pilot clinics, one in Thunder Bay and the other one in Dawson Creek in BC. And so we start to see how the impact of donations and how we can sort of contribute in specific projects for equipment, for example, or different establishment of projects or pilot clinics that will have bearing on the access of care of individuals who live in remote areas or even in underserved areas within a city with marginalized populations as well. So I think, in answer to your question, we enjoy what we're doing, but I think it has to evolve and we would like it to evolve. And if anyone out there is listening and has ideas on how they could collaborate, how they can contribute, we would be really happy to entertain those ideas.
Okay, wonderful. And so Where do people get more information? And even just say somebody wants to honor a mentor tomorrow, how do we do that?
They would go into the website. So the COS has a link to the COS Foundation website. And if they have any trouble, no worries. We are actually actively working on improving the website over the next several weeks to months.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So Guillermo, you may or may not know this, but on this podcast, when we near the end of an episode, we like to close the episode by asking our guests about some of their outside of professional activities. Do you recall that question?
Not really. No, that takes me by surprise completely.
Listen, I know you've had a lot going on in the past, I would say, year and a half. What do you want to tell us? What are you doing? What books are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? What's going on?
A lot is going on.
Yes.
A lot is going on. Exciting things. This point, things that I like to do. I like to kind of stay or stick to a good exercise routine. I'm not completely obsessed with it, but I do like to be fairly regular. I love biking and I love swimming. I listen to a lot of books because I drive quite a bit here in the prairies. So I love thrillers, and I especially love some Spanish and Mexican authors who write very engaging, very intense books. And mostly they always have a twist. They always are kind of thrillers. And I love listening or reading in Spanish because that kind of helps me stay on top of all the vocabulary. But I would say that the most exciting thing that has happened is being a grandpa. And so I think that's the priority for me right now. And I don't get enough of our little, almost 1-year-old grandson. So I'm looking forward to every time we see them or they visit us.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Guillermo. And congratulations on becoming a grandfather. I hear being a grandparent is even better than being a parent. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. Can't get enough of that.
Was there anything else you wanted to add that you wanted to share with the listeners?
No, I think the purpose of the foundation, as I said, I got into it without really knowing what I was getting myself into. I have been incredibly excited about the level of participation, the commitment, the work of so many volunteers, both at the COS level and then in our dealings with different individuals through the COS Foundation as well. I think we all have this need to give back. We are very lucky to live in a country like Canada, to practice a specialty that is really so cool that I think at some point, once we cover our bases and our basics, I think it's so important to give back in an organized and efficient manner. And if the group of us at the COS Foundation board can do a little bit or can facilitate some of those intentions for some of our members, I think then there is a true purpose to the COS Foundation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Guillermo. And it was such a pleasure to have you on the other side.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Cedric. Always a pleasure.
EyeCan wants to know what you think. Please send your comments on today's episode or any suggestions you may have for topics or features to communications@cos-sco.ca, and we'll try to incorporate them into future episodes.
Season 3 of the EyeCan podcast is brought to you by Bayer Ophthalmology. Thank you for your support.
Thank you to the Canadian Ophthalmological Society.
The EyeCan podcast is written and directed by Kim Teitler and produced by John Allaire from Allaire Strategic Works.